Welcome. Thank you for being here and for choosing to spend your time listening. This is the beginning of a long-form story, told slowly, one night at a time. A story meant to be heard in quiet moments, when the world is asleep and attention is sharp. What you are about to hear is the first chapter of a series called The Time That Hunts You. It is not a short story. It is not meant to be rushed. Each episode builds on the last, and every detail matters. If this is your first time here, listen carefully. If you return, you may notice things you missed before. Now let the night settle. The story begins. The time that hunts you. People grow up believing time is neutral. It moves forward, indifferent to who they are or what they do. It passes through their lives without preference, measuring moments without memory. Clocks tick. Days change. Years accumulate. Nothing personal. But there are nights when that belief quietly fails. Minutes disappear without explanation. Conversations resume too late. Rooms feel altered for reasons no one can describe. Most people dismiss these moments as fatigue, distraction, or imagination, and time allows that lie to continue. Because most people do not notice enough to matter. A few do. They stay awake when the world sleeps. They feel the pause before sound returns. They sense that something has reached into the flow of hours and removed a piece without tearing the edges. These people are not chosen. They are noticed. This is not a story about broken clocks or faulty memories. It is about what happens when time stops behaving like a background force and begins to act with intent. Because time does not always move forward. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it watches. And sometimes it hunts. Season 1. The Discovery. Every hunt begins before anyone realizes they are being tracked. Before patterns form. Before rules exist. Before fear has a language. Season 1 follows the first moments of disruption. The skipped minutes, the frozen seconds, the people who remember what others forget. It is the stage where nothing is proven, but everything has already changed. This is where time first reveals itself. Quietly, Ethan did not wake because of a dream. There was no image pulling him out of sleep. No sound that startled him awake. His eyes simply opened, and in that moment he knew rest had already moved beyond his reach. The ceiling fan above him turned slowly, unevenly, tracing the same circles it had traced every night for years. The room looked exactly as it always had. That familiarity should have been comforting. It wasn't. He lay still, listening to the house. Somewhere in the distance, pipes shifted with a quiet knock. Outside, a single car passed and vanished down the street. Nothing unusual announced itself, yet a faint tension pressed against his chest. The sense that something had already changed and had done so quietly. Ethan turned his head and reached for his phone. The movement was automatic, a habit formed by too many sleepless nights. The screen lit his face, pale in the dark. 3:06 a.m. He stared at the numbers longer than necessary, then locked the screen and placed the phone beside him. He had learned not to fight wakefulness. If he stayed still long enough, his thoughts usually slowed and sleep followed. This night did not allow that. The air in the room felt heavier, as though the space itself had tightened. Not enough to see, only enough to feel. Ethan sat up, his heartbeat quickening without a clear reason. He became aware of the sound of the fan, louder now that his attention had found it. Then the sound disappeared. The fan stopped mid-rotation. Not slowly. Not with warning. It froze as if the motion had been erased rather than interrupted. The sudden absence of sound was so complete it felt invasive, as if pressure were building inside his ears. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, to call out to someone else in the house, but no sound emerged. Even his breath seemed uncertain, shallow and incomplete. For a brief moment, the room felt sealed. Then the fan resumed its movement. Sound rushed back in, imperfect but familiar. The distant noises of the night slipped into place. The pressure in the air released. Ethan inhaled sharply. His first instinct was to check the time. He grabbed his phone and unlocked it. 3:08 a.m. He frowned, refreshing the screen, then locking and unlocking it again, waiting for the display to correct itself. Didn't. He restarted the phone, watched it power back on, and checked again. The time remained unchanged. A minute was missing. Not delayed. Not misread. Gone. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his hands resting on his knees. He tried to think logically, to assemble explanations that fit the shape of what he had experienced. Fatigue, a device glitch, a momentary lapse in awareness. None of them felt large enough. A minute does not vanish quietly. He checked the wall clock. The second hand moved smoothly, obediently. He checked his phone again. The display showed no error, no warning, no sign of interruption. The world had continued without that minute. He hadn't. Morning arrived as if nothing had happened. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, pale and indifferent. The alarm rang, sharp and insistent, and Ethan shut it off with more force than necessary. For a brief moment, standing in the early light, he wondered if the night had exaggerated itself. Fear often felt heavier in the dark. Then he checked his phone. Battery history showed the device had last been active at 3:06 a.m. There was no record of 3:07. The doubt collapsed. At breakfast, his parents spoke about errands and schedules. Their voices blended into the ordinary rhythm of the house. Ethan answered when spoken to, nodding at the right moments, but his attention drifted constantly. He half expected the room to tighten again, for sound to vanish without warning. Nothing happened. That unsettled him more than the night had. On the bus to school, he watched the city slide past the window. People moved with purpose, unaware of the minute that had slipped away hours earlier. The thought settled heavily in his mind. How many things disappear without being missed? The first classes passed quietly. Notes filled pages. Teachers spoke. Time behaved. It happened during physics. The teacher was mid-sentence, explaining a concept Ethan barely registered. His pen hovered above the page, unmoving. A familiar pressure built behind his eyes, subtle but unmistakable. The air thickened. The marker froze, suspended just above the board. Sound collapsed inward, not into silence but into absence itself. Ethan's breath caught as he looked around. Every student was frozen. A boy in the front row was caught mid-movement, mouth slightly open. A girl by the window was frozen halfway through a blink. Even dust hung motionless in the air. Ethan stood. The chair made no sound as he pushed it back. He took a step forward, then another. His movements felt normal yet profoundly wrong, like walking through a paused memory. He raised his hand in front of the teacher's eyes. No reaction. The wall clock ticked once, then jumped. 10:41 to 10:42. Sound returned violently. Voices overlapped. The marker completed its line on the board. Someone laughed, unaware of what had just passed. No one noticed. No one except the girl beside him. Her name was Claire. They had shared classes for years without ever really speaking. Now she stared straight ahead, her face drained of color. "Did you feel that?" she whispered. Ethan sat down slowly. "Yes," he said. They did not speak again. They didn't need to. The rest of the day passed carefully. Time did not misbehave again, but Ethan no longer trusted it. As he walked toward the school gate in the afternoon, his phone vibrated. Unknown number. First skip confirmed. Another message appeared almost immediately. Do not speak about it. Observe only. Ethan stared at the screen until the messages vanished, leaving no trace they had ever existed. He stood still for a long moment, students flowing around him, and understood something without knowing how. The night had not been an accident, and it was not finished with him. Ethan did not tell anyone about the messages. He walked home with the phone heavy in his pocket, as if it contained something alive that might react if disturbed. The street looked the same as it always did. Shops closed for the evening. A group of children argued loudly over a game. A dog slept near a gate, barely lifting its head as he passed. Normal life moved around him with careless confidence. He felt separated from it, as though a thin pane of glass had slipped into place between him and the rest of the world. At home, he retreated to his room and shut the door more carefully than usual. He sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, staring at the dark screen. Part of him wanted to throw it across the room. Another part wanted to keep it close, as if distance itself might be dangerous. The messages had disappeared, but the certainty they left behind had not. First skip confirmed. The words echoed in his mind, heavy with implication. Whoever had sent them knew what had happened. More than that, they had expected it. Ethan lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, watching the slow rotation of the fan. This time, the sound stayed. The air did not tighten. Time behaved. That made waiting harder. Dinner passed quietly. His parents noticed he was distracted, but not enough to press the issue. He answered questions automatically, his thoughts elsewhere. Claire crossed his mind more than once. Her pale face in the classroom. The way she had spoken without looking at him, as if afraid that eye contact itself might trigger something else. He checked his phone after eating. No messages. He checked again an hour later. Still nothing. The absence felt deliberate. Night returned slowly, settling over the house in familiar layers. Lights turned off one by one. The television fell silent. By the time Ethan returned to his room, the world outside his window had reduced itself to streetlights and distant shadows. He did not undress immediately. Instead, he sat at his desk and opened the drawer beneath it, pushing aside old notebooks and loose papers until he found what he was looking for. A small digital clock he had once used for studying, powered by batteries instead of a wall outlet. He placed it beside his phone, adjusting it carefully so both displays were visible at once. If time intended to misbehave again, he wanted witnesses. He checked both clocks. 3:01 a.m. Too early. Ethan sat back on the bed and waited. Waiting changed the night. Minutes stretched in uncomfortable ways, each one heavy with expectation. His thoughts drifted, then circled back to the same questions. How long had this been happening? How many times had it happened to him before without his noticing? And why now? At 3:05 a.m., he felt his pulse quicken. At 3:06, he reached for his phone and turned on the camera, placing it on the desk facing the room. He did not fully understand why he did this. Instinct guided his hands more than reason. Both clocks read the same time. 3:06 a.m. Ethan sat on the bed, his back straight, his eyes fixed on the fan above him. He listened carefully, memorizing the sound of its rotation, the faint vibration it sent through the air. The world held steady. Then the sound vanished. The fan froze. The air tightened. Ethan did not move. He had expected fear, panic, the urge to run. Instead, what he felt was a strange clarity, as if something inside him had aligned with the moment rather than resisting it. The room sealed itself. Not physically, but perceptibly. The space felt smaller, compressed. His ears rang softly, then stopped. Even the ringing disappeared, leaving behind something flatter, emptier. He glanced at the clocks. The digital clock on the desk showed nothing. Blank. His phone screen remained on, the recording light glowing red, but the time display had vanished entirely. Ethan swallowed. He tried to speak. His voice did not exist. He did not know how long the absence lasted. There was no sensation of time passing, no internal marker to measure it against. Thoughts came slowly, disconnected from one another. He was aware of himself sitting on the bed. He was aware of the room. But something essential, something that usually connected moments together, had been removed. Then the fan resumed. Sound rushed back, imperfect and too loud. The air expanded again. Ethan gasped, his lungs burning as if he had been holding his breath far longer than he realized. Both clocks lit up at once. 3:08 a.m. Ethan surged forward, nearly knocking the phone from the desk as he grabbed it. The recording was still running. His hands shook as he stopped it. For a moment he didn't press play. He waited, listening to the room, half expecting it to tighten again. Nothing happened. Finally, he replayed the video. The first minute played normally. He sat on the bed, eyes lifted, waiting. The fan turned. Then the image glitched. The screen fractured into static for exactly 60 seconds. No sound, no picture, just digital noise. Then the image returned. Ethan leaned closer, scrubbing backward, slowing the playback frame by frame. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then, in the reflection of the cupboard mirror behind him, something appeared. Not a shadow, not a person, a shape. It stood directly behind where he had been sitting, tall and still, its outline indistinct, as if the image could not fully resolve it. The shape did not move, but its presence felt intentional, positioned with care. Ethan's breath caught. He advanced the video one frame. The shape leaned closer. The mirror's surface warped slightly around it, bending as if under pressure. Then words appeared across the image, burned into the frame itself rather than overlaid. You were not meant to stay awake. The video froze. The screen went black. The file vanished. Ethan stared at the phone long after the display went dark. He did not move. He did not breathe deeply. Some part of him understood that whatever had been watching did not require his attention to remain aware of him. The phone vibrated. Unknown number. You noticed twice. Another message followed. That creates a pattern. Ethan's fingers hovered over the screen. Every instinct told him not to respond. He typed anyway. What are you? The message sent. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a reply appeared. Not a name. Not a warning. Just a sentence. Time does not like witnesses. The screen dimmed. The fan slowed. And from the corner of the room, the digital clock flickered once before resetting itself without input. 3:09 a.m. Ethan lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, the fan now moving at a steady pace above him. His heart gradually slowed, though the tension did not leave his body entirely. He understood something now, not fully, but enough to change the shape of his thoughts. The missing minute was not an error. It was an action. And by staying awake, by watching, by remembering, he had crossed a line time had not intended him to cross. Outside, the night remained quiet. Inside the room, nothing moved. But Ethan knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his chest, that the hunt had already begun.